Hello and welcome, everyone. This is 11th UniMIND Krako meeting, and our guest tonight is Angelika Kłosińska.
Hello.
Angelika is a psychotherapist and a qualified psychedelic therapist, currently working as a mentor in psychedelic research for Poland and serving as an Adherence Rater in an international study on psychedelics. She is also a research therapist in clinical trials in London and maintains a private practice. With extensive experience in expanded states of consciousness and psychedelic integration, her professional roles have ranged from facilitating retreats and integration meetings to working with private clients and participating in research projects. For the past few years, she served as director of the British Transpersonal Association, formerly the British Psychedelic Association, a role that deepened her understanding of the therapeutic potential of psychedelics and the importance of integration in maximizing their benefits for personal growth and healing. By combining traditional therapy, mindfulness practices, and powerful tools associated with expanded states of consciousness, Angelika aims to create a holistic, safe, and supportive space that guides individuals on a transformational path to self acceptance and personal growth.
Thank you very much for your introduction.
And now I would want you to elaborate on this a little bit. So, because I want to know what exactly is your involvement in clinical trials with psychedelic substances, could you first explain what is an adherence rater?
All right. So, an adherence rater is someone who assesses therapists. So you would have like few therapists on a trial in each site, and all of them have to, myself included, of course, adhere to the protocol, to the study protocol. So every clinical study has written protocol, and unlike with normal psychotherapy, adherence to the protocol in trials is necessary. So I'm someone basically who reviews those sessions. Most clinical trial sessions are recorded, either audio recorded or video, and then you'll have people like myself watching and listening and checking. And this is to achieve standardization. So as much as possible, we want every participant of the study to receive the same treatment, both in therapeutic sense and medication. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. You also mention in your bio that you are a research therapist. So, could you tell us something more about how the work of a research therapist works in context of studies with psychedelics? And maybe you could give an example of a study in which you did that.
Yeah, of course. So currently I'm working on a study with Beckley Psytech, and this is 5-MeO-DMT study. I won't be able to talk about this particular study too much because it's still in progress. But we can talk about the previous studies, which are already published. The results are published. So the substance is fast-acting psychedelic 5-MeO-DMT. So it's one of many psychedelic substances. And the patients group is TRD, so treatment-resistant depression patients. So these will be people who have suffered with depression for a certain amount of time and nothing has helped them so far. So research therapist is a person who has to adhere to the protocol, basically. So there is not much freedom in this. In my private therapy work, when I see clients, I can choose for myself and go and follow them really, and choose how I want to work with them, which modality I want to use, etc. And how long the sessions are going to last. With research, this is strictly bounded by the protocol. So whatever the protocol says, sometimes it's one session as preparation, sometimes it's 3 sessions. The better, in my opinion, because this is my opinion, the better protocol, the longer sessions, because I truly believe that psychological support is very important in this matter. So yeah, in some protocols, research therapists are called guides as well, or psychological support people. So the therapy aspect is stripped of us a little bit. And yeah, so that's my role in the research.
Okay, I think there's a lot to unfold right here
Mhm.
because we also people who are interested in the subject probably know that in the research with psychedelics there is a need for a person who guides the patient during the psychedelic experience, and there is also need for preparation sessions which you have mentioned, and maybe some integration sessions. So do you do all of them, or does it depend on the protocol? How does it work in reality?
Yes, so the study that I work on, the structure of the study is what you've mentioned. So this preparation, dosing, and integration. It depends on the sponsor who writes the protocol for the study. But I believe that preparation in those sorts of study is one of the most important thing, because how do we prepare someone, especially if we talk about studies that require that participants are psychedelically naive. This isn't always a requirement, but quite often it is. Or sometimes it's not a requirement, but that's the group of population of people who are ending up in those studies. So for someone who has never experienced any altered state of consciousness, as you might imagine, this will be very important for them to prepare themselves, and as much as we can. So these are the preparation sessions. With the dosing session, in some aspects, this is called a ceremony. So I do work with on legal retreats in the Netherlands as well. So it's, the language changes there. It's important for that participant to be guided by someone, or not even guided, but for someone to be around, um, and if the participant is struggling or wants to interact, there is someone there. I know of some, they're not studies, but I know of some companies in the US that will send um, ketamine packages to to people, and some program online, half an hour program to follow, and there is no presence of the person. I think personally that's unethical, to do. But research, fortunately, pays attention to have someone like myself, or therapists to support people. And also it's about work, like you've mentioned, of integration. In research that's quite limited, of course, because the time and money and whatever depends on the protocol. Again, this could be 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions. Some sponsors will be a bit more flexible and make sure that the participants are looked after. But that's again important, because the material that might arise in the session needs to be, we need to look after those participants, and needs to be taken care of.
Right. So back to what you've said, at the beginning, psychedelically naive, of course, means that someone has never taken psychedelic substance before, as I understand.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I mean, some people will have their practices like, I don't know, yoga or meditation or holotropic breath work, which can take you to those places as well. Um, but that's mostly people who are coming to the retreats, for example, and they look for their own, exploration. When patients are applying to take part in the research, they are usually patients who have struggled for a long time and, you know, have taken like, classic psychiatric medication. Um, so most of the time, and there is a stigma. There is a huge stigma around psychedelics, like we know. So it's quite it's quite hard to find these patients who have, not that we are trying, but it's not a requirement. But I personally think that it's helpful if someone has had some kind of experience of altered state before, so they're not going into unknown completely.
Okay, so you wouldn't discriminate people who had spiritual experiences during meditation or holotropic breathwork.
No, no, of course not. No, I mean,
Oh,
I think n- with when it comes to psychedelic research, this is, and we talked about it last week in the conference, in like a workshop thing, um, that spirituality and, mm, I don't know, higher power, God, universe, whatever, those experiences are mentioned in psychedelic studies because there's no other way these things to appear. People connect to those entities, so it's hard to discriminate that. And psychedelically um, trained therapists have to be open to such experiences, to hear about them at least.
yeah. What I meant was, would you exclude them from participating in the study if the requirement was to be psychedelically naive?
Um, I don't. Well, I wouldn't personally. I think where if the protocol is written in a way, perhaps they wouldn't use that terminology as I have, psychedelically naive. Perhaps they would say that you have never taken a substance, but
Hmm.
not. I don't think the study protocol would go as far as have you had any altered states, you know, of consciousness. Do um, due to breathing or um, some other, I'm not sure if they would be that thorough with their protocols.
I see. I see. I'm sorry if my questions would be too detailed, but I
Yeah.
have an impression that today we have a unique opportunity to talk to someone who really experienced working in clinical trials with psychedelics. So I am curious about many things. I hope the viewers share my curiosity. So from what you've said before, I have two questions.
Hmm.
One of them is about the recruitment to studies with psychedelics, and
Hmm.
so basically how this is being done. And the other question is about psychiatric medication you've mentioned. And probably I would like you to start with this one because it really perplexes me. Um, do you require people to go off their medication when they enter a psychedelic study? How does it look like in reality?
Okay, so we'll start with the second part of your question. Um, Again, I'm not talking about any particular study, but usually, um, so there are two ways because there are studies already that are incorporating SSRIs. So the participants are not asked to wean off the medication. So I know of those studies already, which are happening because it is really hard for those patients who are on antidepressants for several years, for example, to just then stop. And some of the studies will require that. And that's because of the FDA regulations, I believe, that, you want to assess if the drug is successful, if the drug is good enough to treat depression. And then if you add another component, for example, that manufacturer of that of the other antidepressant might be saying, oh, by the way, but this was, the person was on my medication, on my drug. So how can you assess efficacy of the other? So to have as clear data as possible for most studies that I know of. And, it's easy to find those studies on clinical.gov and look at the protocols, like not the detail of the protocol, of course, but, just overall view. So to answer your question, for most studies, these participants have to be weaned off. And the recruitment for those studies, the study sites, so whoever signs contract with the sponsor or whoever, is the organizer of the study. Sometimes it's the government-funded studies as well, which I know we have some good news in Poland as well about that. But so sometimes, you can find it on the clinical.gov website and you can apply through there. But then universities or study sites will have their ways of recruiting and advertising. And it's a little bit different with psychedelics because you cannot really advertise it. You can inform about it. And, and there is a difference between information and advertisement, because you won't be saying to someone, oh, come on, we'll help you with this. But you can only say, this is what we do if you are successful to go through the screening of the criteria, because it's a long process. And if we are talking about patients who have suffered with depression for a long time, sometimes the process itself, it's tough enough. And then how do we find the participants which are following in only these criteria and not others? So, for example, if someone is depressed but not anxious, how do we separate these two? Because usually, mental health conditions, we are humans, so we will have all the variety, isn't it? On one day you could be depressed, another day you'll be anxious about something. And how do we find that? And we will have these metrics and measurements and stuff, and hope for the best, I think, to find the right person as a participant.
So, for example, if I suffer from treatment-resistant depression and general anxiety disorder, and I was informed that you are preparing a study, psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, I say, hey, I have treatment-resistant depression and anxiety. Then what happens?
I'm not sure if anxiety would be enough to exclude you, but if you have, for example, bipolar disorder or any sort of schizophrenia in your family or whatever, that would exclude you from most.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about those higher risks. And also if we are trying to assess efficacy for certain treatment. It's quite complicated with mental health conditions anyway, because, if you have broken leg, that's where you're trying to fix. It's very clear. If you've got high blood pressure, you measure the blood pressure after, taking medication. It's very black and white. It's either goes down or not, or doesn't. With psychedelics, there is a whole variety of measurements. And then, there is that question about, was that therapy itself that helped the connection with the person, or with two therapists in some studies, or was it a drug itself, or, or a combination of? And if there is a combination, how do we then standardize it, and how do we, meet these criteria for the study that FDA would require.
That's very interesting, and we will go back to it, as I would like to devote the whole segment to risks of taking psychedelics. But you mentioned something about good news from research in Poland. Could you elaborate on that?
I'm not sure if I can talk. I think I can. Can I? I'm not sure 100%.
Okay, but
Because I'm not sure if this was so. Um, I you probably know about UniMIND, the Institute of Psychedelic
yes.
Therapies. Okay. So there was this webinar we did last week, or this week, was it? Not last week, no. And they have mentioned something about the study of psilocybin, but I'm not sure if this was during the call or after the call. My memory is bad, so so I'm
Right.
so I won't say too much about this, but I think the information is there. Bear with me one moment, because I don't want to say something that I shouldn't. But okay, so there is a ranking list of NB list of open non-commercial clinical trials, and the psilocybin trial is on the approved. So this is
Public information,
public
not
information.
classified, what we're talking about right now. So,
No, it is tough. You see, with these kind of topics, when we talk about the retreats. Obviously, we talk about the retreats which are, I'm taking part with. They are legal there in the Netherlands. But then we are still talking about Class A, classified drugs in many countries. So, and also with the clinical research, there is that secrecy about it as well. So it's hard to know what we are and aren't allowed to say sometimes.
yes, I'm not expecting that you will share some secrets with us, but I already know from the psychedelic science conference that took place this year, so in 2024 in
Mm.
Warsaw, that there were studies in Warsaw, and this was publicly announced during this conference. However, when the scientist was asked about the result, she said, "Absolutely no, I'm not saying anything." But I think it's still uplifting to know that these studies are taking part.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know exactly who is financing them. I think it shouldn't be a secret anyway if the studies are somehow announced
Yeah.
publicly.
Yeah. So with these studies, if you go to clinical.gov, you can see which cities in Poland and which sponsors and which drugs are being tested. So in Poland already there are some psilocybin studies and 5-MeO-DMT studies by a couple of sponsors, I believe. So my research work as a mentor therapist for Poland, for Beckley Psytech, I know we've got few sites in Poland that already are working with psychedelics, but this is the phase 2B study, which is not published yet because we have not finished, and that's in Poland. The phase 2A was not conducted in Poland, so it's just a little bit of knowing which part of the study we can talk. Because in clinical trials, the 2A study is the one that checks the efficacy and safety, and then the 2B study is to assess whether the drug is safe and successful to treat certain condition, like in this case, treatment-resistant depression. And then hopefully, if everything goes well, if we have good results, then we can come through third stage of the study, so phase 3, and that's much bigger, and hopefully, you know.
So, just to clarify, what are these stages, the phases of the clinical trials? If we could go from the beginning to an end, just to have an overview.
Yeah, so from the beginning, so the studies will start on like mice and rats and whatever, or if they don't even. My colleague Gregor, which I have spoken with, he's better at explaining this. But so the clinical studies, before they become clinical study, they are just studies to extract the molecules and then the medicine, and then we test it on animals, which I don't really like to think about that much. And then we start the clinical trials, which are studies on humans. And the first phase of that study would be safety. So we test it on healthy individuals. I don't know who that is really personally, but on people who have no symptoms of any kind of problems. And then we have the green light to go with the clinical phase 2B, for example, where we test efficacy of that drug on a specific group of patients. So this would be PTSD or depression or anxiety or whatever. And then if that in a smaller scale, so that will be a few hundred people in some studies, I believe. If that's successful and no one got hurt, and treatment was good enough for the FDA of approving both these standards, then we can move forward. And then there is a phase 3 study. And then phase 4 would be checking efficacy of it in public. So it's a very, very long process.
I'm sorry, I didn't get what phase 3 and 4 was about exactly.
So phase 3 will be on a larger scale. So
Okay.
so these are like thousands usually of participants who are taking. So the safety is already assessed. So we know that the drug, for example, is safe to use, whichever drug we are using. And then we go to stage 3 where, it's efficacy. So after the stage 3, usually the medicine or the drug is available to public.
Okay. Right. So for those people who just joined, we've just discussed certain issues regarding safety and some order in clinical trials, the phases of clinical trials. And my question right now is this. So what it really takes for psychedelic to become a prescribed medicine? Do you think it is possible? And what would be the clinical way to achieve it?
Yeah. So the clinical way to achieve it is through clinical trials. So we have to have these medications approved. Psilocybin and MDMA has been approved in Australia last year, I think, or at the beginning of this year. I can't remember exactly, but we talked about it at the conference in June. But in reality, there was something like 9 psychiatrists for the whole country of Australia who have the license to prescribe and use these medications. So imagine the big Australia, and then only 9 practitioners being able to use it. But also there was a caveat in it that you mustn't advertise it, and they had to get the training and then the source, the psilocybin and MDMA from like some safe places. And we know that previously people researchers, they had problems with sourcing the medication as well. So there is a lot of. So on paper, it looks like we are moving forward, but in reality, in practicality of it, um, not much can be done still, because it's still very, very difficult to be able to use it. So we do need trials, medical trials, clinical trials uh, to prove efficacy of these medications, and to create some kind of protocols which will be accepted by the Western culture. So we don't, we don't have to go to, I don't know, Holland or Peru or somewhere to have the ayahuasca ceremony and then try to integrate it with some therapist somewhere or not. We could have some treatment that are prescribed by, I don't know, NFZ or NHS or whichever country you live in. But I think we are still a long way away from it.
Okay. But we have, you've just explained how clinical trials progress from establishing safety to establishing efficacy on a large population.
Yes.
So I assume that this, let's say, partial legalization in Australia that you've mentioned
Yeah.
was motivated by some sort of clinical trials that proved that these substances are in fact safe and they have some efficacy. Am I right?
Yes, that has to be the case.
All right.
Because
So
that's. Mhm.
in that case, why is it still difficult to obtain these substances? And why so few people um, try to work with them?
Okay, so it's the legality of it and bureaucratic barriers that will be in places where it's allowed. So that will be Australia, for example. It's allowed, but it's not easy, and it's very, very expensive still if for the patient to pay for it. I can't remember exactly, but it was something like, I don't know. I don't want to make the number up, but it wasn't. It was in thousands of dollars, but not like 5 or 10, but more like 20. So not many people
Really?
will be able to. Yes, because if you think about the whole, um, yeah, if you think about the time that needs to be spent with the participant and for the safety, usually there are two um, um, therapists required, and back and forth. Psychiatrist's time is very expensive as well. So they were very expensive. I think in uh, it's also about the stigma of it. Many many doctors and researchers are fear working with psychedelics. They don't want to damage their careers, or they don't see it as something potentially healing or helpful. There is not enough education around it. I mean, for, when I think about myself and my work, because I'm in this field with other therapists and colleagues of mine and friends, and we do talk about psychedelic therapy, or as I like to call it, therapy assisted with psychedelics, because that's how I see it personally. And you think, oh yes, things are changing because there are so many conferences and there are so many books now written and so many people talk about it. But then you move your head above that cloud and people don't know it. People still think about psychedelics as drugs, as drugs that will make you jump out of the window, or will hurt your pregnancy, or, will do whatever. And occasionally they do that because, people take it not in the therapeutic settings and not being held, in that safe container, which usually mixed with other substances like alcohol, then we can hear all these stories. But when we have positive results published, like, for example, the one that was published at Beckley Psytech. So there is the one I sent you. So Beckley Psytech announces positive initial data from phase 2A study for treatment-resistant depression, And I know this study exists, because I've told you, but not many people do. But if someone, does something to themselves or jump out of the window or whatever, because of what people call bad trip or something else, everyone knows about it because the media will talk about it, So unless we have some good data in the public domain so people know about it, then doctors will get curious about it. And the webinars like we did last week and others specifically aimed at mental health professionals and health professionals in general, then to spread the knowledge around, and make people interested, because I'm thinking my opinion or my knowledge is that there are only 9 psychiatrists so far when we checked in Australia, because it's so hard to obtain. But also it could be because not that many are interested or know about it,
Yes, I'm aware of that. And when this news was spread, I also had the feeling that it's a great news, but that there is lack of framework for psychiatrists or psychotherapists.
Yes.
So unfortunately, I am not surprised by this state of being.
Hmm.
Mm, Probably we should first develop some relatively universal, as you said, accepted by the Western culture framework of uh, therapy with
Yeah.
psychedelics, which shouldn't be that difficult. Do you agree?
I do and I don't, because when um, I work with clients who come to me to integrate their psychedelic experiences, and the material that comes up in sessions can be quite unique. And I can imagine that if they brought that up with a therapist which isn't trained, they would be um, quite shocked sometimes, or surprised to say the least, those therapists. So we do need a framework. These courses do exist these days. What we need as well is some ethical bodies. So, if you are registered psychologist, psychotherapist, doctor, whatever, you need to be a member of some ethical body, and you are responsible, and your work is being checked. We need something like that, in my opinion, for these sorts of therapies, because the need is clearly there. The underground is growing, but the danger with that is that, no one is accountable for the work. So yeah, I'm digressing a little bit, but
Well, definitely someone should be accountable for the work, but
mm,
the question is whether a therapist could be like totally blamed for the outcome of the therapy, or just for providing the correct circumstances
mm,
and establishing the safety. What do you think about? Because, for example, yesterday I've spoken to a friend of mine who is a psychotherapist, and we were debating whether there is some inherent risk to taking psychedelic substance, um, regardless of the preparation.
uh,
So how does it work in your opinion?
regardless of the preparation and the context of it. you take it in the clinical research, or you take it in the jungle, or in the retreat, or at your home, you can have challenging experience. But what I'm thinking, if you are, as a professional, sitting with someone in the altered state, there is some kind of responsibility. Of course, you cannot predict what kind of experience the person is going to have, but your responsibility as a therapist, in my opinion, in that sense, if you are working from A to Z, but that's impossible still in the Western world. But if we hypothesize that, it's important to remember that it's not that the therapist will be to blame, but you are there to look after and be open to experience of the participants. So whatever that is, then you are helping. So you are responsible to help to integrate, to help to navigate that experience, and not to leave someone alone. And that's the question as well of, in London, for example, we've got these organizations that offer integration or psychedelic integration, like for example, Acer, and this is for people who have taken part in clinical trials, but also had some experiences themselves, because there is a need for people to be guided. So yes, I don't think we can take full responsibility as therapists in that sense, because we can't control what kind of experience a person will have, but we can support them through those challenging experiences. So if the therapist or the sitter, because the sitter does not have to be a therapist, in my opinion, but if the sitter is equipped to help that participant with whatever arises, then perhaps we have more chance for the whole process to be beneficial for the person. And then it comes, question about integration of these experiences, be it challenging or not.
Okay, so thank you for these clear guidelines for sitters. But you've also mentioned that there is a need for an ethical body, as you say. Could you describe it in detail? What would you suggest to be done in that regard before psychedelics are legalized in a country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So myself and colleagues from the BTA, yeah, my colleagues, we all left now, so we are not part of the BTA. But one of my colleagues, especially John Anderson, he is creating the code of ethics for psychedelics, and he collaborates with the Scottish group SPRG, and they are trying to create something, a framework, if you like, for psychedelic sitters, therapists, and coaches to adhere to. So there is a clear guidance. There is in the Netherlands, there is an organization called Guild of Guides, and they do the same. They have their own code of ethics that, if you sign up to be a member of that organization, you have to adhere to those rules. And what I find within my colleagues and groups of people that I know are working with psychedelics, for most parts, people are taking it really, really seriously and want to be part of these groups and want to, it works in both ways, isn't it? When we talk about the safety and safety of the participants, or safety of people taking these psychedelics, or the clients, we need to be, mindful of safety and of those sitters as well. So it works both ways. If we have the governing body that has some code of ethics, and we can adhere to that, yeah, I think that would be beneficial.
Sorry, and thank you for this.
No worries.
Just before I proceed with more questions, I would like to make a technical remark for our participants. Because there are some questions on chat already to you, Angelika, but I would like to encourage anyone to ask them out loud themselves, so we have a nice atmosphere of a reunion. But there will be time for it. I think in some short time we will make a short break, if you will, and after the break, we will have the questions from the audience, if this is okay. And I strongly encourage to ask the questions yourself, because for me it's also sometimes difficult to follow the chat and having conversation with the guest at the same time. And I admit that during the last meeting, I just haven't noticed some questions from the chat. So if you want to be sure that your question is asked, do it yourself. I strongly invite you to take the space, but that will come in a while. Um, as I still have some questions, I'm craving to ask Angelika. So, regarding the clinical trials, maybe let's try to go to try to close this topic at
Mm-hmm.
least for a moment. And for that, I would like to ask you about your dream clinical trial with psychedelics. If you had all the money you need, and all the resources you need, what kind of study would you design? What would be most important in your opinion right now?
Oh, okay. So, um, yeah. So the I would, if I could work with the medicine or with the study drug, that would be psilocybin, probably. Um, I don't know a specific group of people, perhaps the depression, or I could include, all other modalities as well. Um, but I think if I could design it in a way that would be the most beneficial for participants, and if money was not an issue, we would have a lot of fully trained um, therapists. Basically, this wouldn't be a study, this would be a retreat. Because I believe that would be the best work, to um, not to treat people individually. The sessions with the psychedelics and therapists could be individual, but also group sessions, because these people then go back to their environment, and we don't live in solitude. We live with other people and in communities. So if I have an unlimited amount of money, I would organize studies that are based in community style. So we would have not only one person coming back and forth and the whole medical team working with them, but I would design it in a way. And I believe there are some studies on psilocybin with cancer patients in the US of that nature already, that they are trying to create these group models. And I think because I've seen it, on the retreats, that there is a different level of connection and healing that goes on when you have group of people taking the medicine together, and that's not very possible in a clinical setting as it is now. But I think it's very beneficial, because then not only you have your own experience, but then you witness other people's experiences, and then you can share, and your pain is not as great. And also I would have it in the beautiful settings, in nature and great food and music. So like I said, this wouldn't be clinical trial. This would be a retreat somewhere, in the beautiful forest by the lake. But you let me go with my imagination, so I did.
Absolutely. I think we should have more debates like this. Like what would be what we want, what
Mm,
we desire, and how to put it in practice. Not only thinking what we can do right now with the limitations we have, and how to go around limitation. That's
yeah.
not everything. So just leaving clinical trials with this beautiful image aside for a little moment, I have some general questions about psychedelics. So, for example, there is this well known phenomenon of the ego dissolution,
Hmm.
the so called ego dissolution, and there are some concerns that people after such strong ego dissolution experience facilitated by psychedelics may have some issues with their personality, or
Yeah.
may have difficulties in coming back to their regular daily self, and that some people probably are more vulnerable in that regard. For example, during the mind the Insight conference organized by Mind Foundation, I was talking to a German philosopher, Christine Hauskeller, and we were wondering whether it's good to give psychedelics or MDMA to adolescents because they may not have their personality as well developed
Hmm.
as people who are 30 years old, for instance. What
Hmm.
is your take on that?
So yeah, my opinion, yes, for sure, dissociation can happen after taking the psychedelics, and this could be called ego dissolution. This could be called oneness or togetherness or emptiness. People call it different names, and without appropriate integration, these can be very challenging states for people. um, Very challenging, and I have worked with those. So, um, in some instances, people will have like psychotic episodes that are induced by psychedelic drugs, which is very dangerous and um, painful for that person and their family as well. And so I would take it very seriously that psychedelics are not for everyone. And continuing with your question about adolescence, I think, I mean, I wouldn't put MDMA in the same class as other psychedelics, because maybe with MDMA and talking therapy, where someone is in that state of openness and warmth and whatever, perhaps the therapeutic aspect of that could be still helpful to a young person, because this is more of a talking therapy then, you know. But if you are talking about someone, taking psilocybin, for example, a high dose of psilocybin, then we've got a different scenario. And that could be potentially, you know, harmful to that person. And we know that the brain is not that developed yet, in the person who is in their teens or early 20s. Um, and that could be harmful again. But so, yeah, with the clinical research, again, adult is an adult. So sometimes it's like, I think it's 18 or 21 with some studies maybe, which for me it's quite early. But then again, where do you draw the line? It's like, as a society, we do draw the line somewhere. If we allow someone to vote and make decisions and, have sex and all that, we allow them to decide about their bodies. Maybe, maybe it's the same with psychedelics. I'm not sure. And that's where there is a huge importance of integration and protection, and the whole container of preparation and integration is very important when it comes to psychedelics. And that's, I feel strongly about, that we need to prepare the person as much as we can. In clinical research, we talk quite a lot with our colleagues about the consent, and how much of this consent is, how can you consent to something that it's so indescribable? It's hard, isn't it? Because if you consent to, I don't know, paracetamol study, for example, you know that you are either going to feel the pain or you're not going to feel the pain. But with this one, you just cannot predict. So I don't know if we can, ever stop it, or should we stop it either? I don't know. But I think it's important to create the container that looks after these people. So even if we have these situations that you described, these like ego dissolutions or dissociations, which can be positive for some people, but if they aren't, then we have the container to look after such person, to support them through that, and perhaps not let them spiral into that deep end, whereas, then they require hospitalization or further help. I hope I answered the question and not too long.
No, absolutely not too long. And I would like to go even deeper in this matter, because we were talking something that we know as psychotic experience, let's say psychosis. But what it really mean? What does it really mean? What does it really mean? What is the essence of this experience, especially in context of psychedelic experience? Maybe I should ask, is it the same psychotic experience of a schizophrenic patient who loses grip on reality, or is it something different?
And that depends on the person, and that depends on the container that we have. I worked with a client, if I may share this as an example. I work with a client who's like a very young 19-year-old student, and she came to me and we work in integration. So she took some LSD with her boyfriend. It's quite a high dose of that. The boyfriend went to the toilet, whatever. And in that time, she looked through his phone and found something she didn't like. So the boyfriend came back, and she was like coming up with experience of LSD. But in psychedelics research, we talk about set and setting. That's very important, how the person feels, and the setting, how what surrounds them, etc. So in this moment, she started arguing with the boyfriend. This was her first ever experience. She went home. She called her mother. She went home. And luckily, her 17-year-old brother was there, who stayed with her all night and was aware that she needed that kind of support, because the mother wanted to take her to the hospital. And imagine the person who is coming up for the first time in psychedelic experience, because this was her first time with a boyfriend. She didn't have a clue. Going through all these experiences, then going to the hospitals with the bright lights and people panicking around her, etc. Things could happen that could cause, this is my imagination, but I could imagine that this could cause a psychotic breakdown. This could be very traumatic for the person. And it was traumatic enough that she was searching for someone like myself to work through those experiences, but luckily had someone to stay with her all night, which was her brother, and convincing enough to the mother not to take her to the hospital.
I see. So basically, what happens during the psychedelic experience is unpredictable,
Yes.
and we should know this. Everyone should know this. This is the risk.
Yes.
Um, that's an interesting example, by the way. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I will proceed to my next question, because I just want to make it clear whether we are talking about the danger of experiencing this psychotic state of mind during the effects of the substance, during the psychedelic experience, or after. Like, is it dangerous? Is the danger that these psychotic states of mind may remain in a person?
And again, both are possible. So sometimes people will have very strong experience, psychedelic experience, and at the time when it's happening, they're kind of okay with it, or they don't know what to make of it, and then they'll think about it, and they'll have those flashbacks. In some cases, with some psychedelics, you might have these experiences, and and then if they haven't got any kind of support or support group, I'm not talking about therapeutic support as such, because not everyone can afford it, not everyone knows about it, but at least peer support groups where they can talk through those experiences with other people who have experienced similar things, and normalize it a little bit, or find some grounding experiences that will help them to go back to the body, so to speak, to connect with themselves again. If you let these things unchecked, it could happen both in the psychedelic experience and after the psychedelic experience, where the person is on their own and perhaps some challenging material came up. Because, in research or in other work, challenging materials come up. Those things like called bad trips do happen, but it's how we contain it and how we work with it. And when the person is being helped and they are held through that, and they can hold your hand, and they know they are not alone, and then they can talk about it, no matter how weird the experience was, it normalizes it, and it makes it okay. And then perhaps we can get some golden nuggets and work with them and find it then beneficial. But if someone just takes it, I don't know, at home on their own, and there's no one there to help, it could be quite traumatic.
Thank you, Angelika.
Thank you.
Now you have some time to ask Angelika anything you want. To ask your question, please first use the reaction sign. You will find them in your Zoom menu, just on the left hand of the screen. There is a reaction button, and if you click on it, there is raise up your hand button. You just click it, and it looks like this. So this gives me the information that you want to ask a question, and then I give you the mic, and you're free to ask whatever you want. So if I could see the show of hands, um, that would help me to somehow moderate the debate. And we have the first one. Jagoda, go ahead.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Angelika. I've learned a lot. But I still have several questions, actually. I hope that's okay. They'll take a little bit of your time. Yeah, I mean, many things came up during the questions from Alex, so I would like to circle back to several aspects that you've mentioned. So my first question will be going back to the study protocol. So as far as I know, the study protocol is written by the research group, and then it's approved by some ethical body or the local university ethical committee. Those are also published in journals for transparency and, I don't know, several different reasons. So my question about that would be, In your experience, these study protocols, how difficult or how easy are they to be approved? Are there some things that, I don't know, you've noticed that immediately gets the study rejected by the board, or yeah, what's your experience with that?
I mean, I wouldn't know that because I don't take part in those, this part of the process is something that I don't take part. It's it- studies on psychedelics are hard to approve because of the stigma as well, and the practicality of it, and the research is quite often delayed, waiting for substance. For example, when the research already starts, they have to obtain the substance for the study, and sometimes it's not produced in the country of the study; it's somewhere else. So then they have to deal with that, and for example, like us now here in the UK after Brexit, there's all different scenario with the Europe part and stuff, and the legal and bureaucratic barriers are still huge. But I don't know what would be the specific of that. Your question is quite specific, like what will block. I think from what I know, even in Poland, there will be different regions of Poland operating differently. So there is a lot left to interpretation. So when things are left into interpretation, the person who interprets it, as we know with with MAPS and MDMA study and all that, it you will have the same data as me, and you'll read it differently, and therefore you will make a different decision. So yeah, I hope this answered your questions like as much as I can.
Thank you. And actually, following up on that, since you offer a pretty unique perspective as someone who has been involved both in clinical trials as well as having a private practice, and also someone from operating, let's say, in the UK system. I mean, we had some speakers here in UniMIND from the US and from Poland and from several different countries, but as far as I remember, we have not met someone from the UK perspective. So yeah, maybe you could summarize how, yeah, what's your feeling? Is the UK ahead of other countries? Is it lagging in some things? Is the policy being talked about, or is there something in the works? Is there something that we can look forward to, or is it still kind of slowed and delayed? What's your perspective on that?
That there are quite a lot of clinical research that are happening in the UK, so that's good. I know that people are preparing for for change. So organizers of break-in conventions, for example, or there is there is the course that is accredited at Exeter University, which is a psychedelic practitioner course, or I can't remember the exact name, but it's got psychedelic in the mix, and it's accredited by the university. So things are shifting in that sense. Some of my colleagues are working in working in collaboration with the Scottish government, because you need to remember that the UK will be then England, Wales, and Scotland. So I'm based in Wales. I don't know if there is much going on, but I know with the Scottish groups, they are trying to get some things moving in their government with the Scottish laws, which are different. And from what I've heard as well, and they've got some great group of people there, like, activists and some professors at, prominent universities, etc., like people who are able to push the needle, I hope. So things are moving, shifting, but then when I don't know how it's going to be with regards of usually what the US does, then the rest follows, unfortunately, whether it's good or bad, So we had the war on drugs and prohibition. So then we had to all follow, or I don't know if we had to, but we did. And now, people are spending millions of pounds, euros, to reverse that, So one would think that if things are changed in the States, then it will trickle down to us. Perhaps if it changes in Europe, then the UK will follow, or maybe this will be vice versa. Maybe the UK will be first. I don't know enough about it, but a lot is happening in research. Sometimes people say optimistically that, we are, a few years away, but others will be more skeptical about it. And to be fair, I don't know. We are waiting for the next convention next year. I think it's going to be April or something. And then, we will hear a little bit more about these things. But I do remember from the last meeting in Break-In Convention, there was this interview with Amanda Fielding and Cosmo, and he was saying something quite funny and important, that his mom was called a witch and a druggie. When he was little, he was like, children would laugh at him, and now people will say to him, "Your mom is super cool," because she does all this research on on LSD and Alzheimer's or dementia and all that stuff. So shift in perception. The Michael Pollan's book as well. People are more aware. So and I'm thinking about another aspect as well, that, these politicians who are now creating the law and rules, some of them had some experiences in the 70s and 60s, the personal experience, those hippies. So maybe, there's enough of those. Who knows?
Hopefully, fingers crossed that they still remember their youth.
Yeah.
Second last question would be, I would like to ask you more about your private practice and your journey to becoming a therapist that offers psychedelic assisted therapy, especially in the context of what we said earlier today, that there are some courses that are being offered to therapists that are interested in that, but some of them are accredited, some are maybe not, and there is no one central body that regulates how this is done. So I would like to hear, what was it for you? How was it for you to obtain the license or some certification? How was the training for you? What did you think was missing to find along the way and learn by yourself?
So, thank you very much. That's a really beautiful question, and I would love to be able to answer that differently. However, I am not I don't offer psychedelic assisted therapy because that's impossible. So what I do, I work in research, which, then I'm a research therapist, and I work as an integration therapist. So people who will have these kind of experiences will come to me and we can integrate those experiences, but I don't take part in the dosing or ceremony, whatever you want to call it. When I travel to the Netherlands and I organize retreats, I don't organize it as a therapist. It's just a retreat run by some sitters, which, by the way, are all therapists, but we don't work there in the therapeutic sense because that will make me lose my license, So, and when it comes to training, psychedelic training, I'm trained by Fluence, I'm trained by the BTA, so I've got some like transpersonal training. I've got training with experiential parts as well. So I've got quite a lot of I don't know if it's a lot or not, depends who's asking, but I've got some experience of psychedelically assisted altered states myself. So I think that gives me as well, I don't know, that gives me perhaps more credibility when I talk to people about their experiences because I have had them myself. So I have all these qualifications which will allow me to work in the research, so I can be a research therapist. However, I would love to be able to call myself, psychedelic therapist, but that doesn't exist yet, because if you do that, you would have to work underground. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, best of luck. And I hope one day you will
Yeah,
be.
yeah, that would be my dream. You see, if I could have a client which comes to me and I work with them, and I would love to call it, therapy assisted with psychedelics. So we could use psychedelics as a tool, one of tools in therapy. So I could work with someone, get to know them, and then expand that, work with psychedelic journey, and then work to integrate it, and then perhaps work again, and then I would imagine I would get some, not I would get, that person would get some good result and transformation. But that's still a dream.
Hopefully not for too long, but we'll see about it.
Hopefully.
You've also mentioned a study that is in progress right now on 5-MeO-DMT, which,
Yes.
as you know, it's the bufo, so obtained from at least in the native context, from a toad in the Central America. But I guess in the studies, it's the synthetic version of the
That's
compound.
right. Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as I know, or at least from the people that I know who've been to such ceremonies, the administration of bufo creates an immediate out of body experience that for the person experiencing the trip, let's say, lasts for a much longer time than for the observer of it.
Yeah.
So my question on that would be, in comparison to psilocybin or LSD and so on, what do you think is the place of bufo in the therapy context? Does it offer something that the other substances cannot, or is it something that could be combined, or maybe not at the same time, but in the therapy? Is there some advantage to it? Is there some disadvantage? What's your opinion on it?
So my opinion, advantages is the time. So the perception of time for the participant might be different. Like you said, they might think that they are, it lasts forever because they haven't got the perception of that time, or it's altered in that way. But from the perspective of the research, or then perhaps administration of the drug in, if it's approved, if it goes through all the stages of clinical trials, it's very simple because it's fast acting and short lasting. It costs less. So in psychedelic research, to work with psychedelics, you need a therapist or two therapists. We know that for safety of the participants and therapists as well, usually that's how those trials are conducted, that you have two therapists in the room. So if you imagine LSD, I don't know, 12 hours, 10 hours, depends. Psilocybin, 6 to 8 hours. So you pay two therapists for that. Everyone needs to earn money and make a living. So, it's that. And then there'll be like some, I don't know, doctors, nurses, whoever the medical staff involved, versus with 5-MeO-DMT, for example, it's much shorter. So the experience lasts, 40, 50 minutes, then, whatever else. I can't talk about the details. I'm not sure about the protocol, but, if it's a public knowledge, everyone can find it on clinicaltrials.gov. So that's the advantage of it for sure. The time that it's just such fast acting psychedelic. The disadvantages compared to others, when you work with psilocybin, it's quite, it's slow and gentle to start with. We call it this flight turbulence, and you can go into it quite gently, and there's usually like the time to adapt to it, to adjust to it. With 5-MeO-DMT, quite often there is no time. It's it's it takes you places quite quick. So if someone is not prepared for that, and how can you prepare someone? It's quite challenging. So there are advantages and disadvantages. In ideal world, I would, if I could work with psychedelics, I would start off with something gentler. If someone has not tried anything before, and then gradually, but there are people who would say that this isn't a good approach, because if someone is anxious, the gentle approach might cause more anxiety in them. So, I think these these could be like, evaluated on an individual basis. So if we have the patient, if we have the client in front of us, and we can then assess what they need and how they work and how they, what could they benefit from, and then go from there. But with research, of course, we have one drug. And also in research, we have to remember about the placebo, which is, when the research is blinded, how can you then work with that? And 95% of participants of clinical studies recognize the placebo correctly. I don't know what's happened with those 5% and how they not, but they don't. So.
Yeah, thank you for this perspective. I definitely agree that the individual approach is the key in this context. But yeah, thank you so much. I'll let other participants ask some questions.
Thank you, Agata. Thanks.
Thank you. Milena, please.
Hello. I would like to ask about and elaborate more about the risk of psychosis, and especially regarding people that have a family history of psychosis, of schizophrenia, for example. Is it safe for them to take any psychedelics, or maybe some psychedelics are more safe for those people? Or is it more like it's not safe at all for this group of people that have higher risk of schizophrenia because of the family history?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Milena. I haven't got definite answer to that because I wouldn't be able to say definitely yes or no. I know in research or in when we screen people participating in our retreats, that would be an exclusion. So this is really high risk. And then responsibility has to be with someone, and in this case would be with the research staff, or with, if it's a retreat, this would be with retreat organizers. So I would say that the risk is too high. Psychedelics are not for everyone, and I wouldn't take that risk.
Thank you. So you wouldn't take that risk with any of the psychedelics, even with MDMT?
MDMA.
MDMA, sorry, yes.
No. I'm just making sure if you're saying DMT or MDMA.
Yes, MDMA.
Yeah. So this is again my personal opinion. Perhaps MDMA it's not the classic psychedelic. So it depends in what context, and what dosage as well. I've never worked in the research with MDMA. I almost did the MAPS training, but then they pulled it out, so I didn't get the opportunity to do it. It is something that I might, consider in the future and work with it, and then I might be able to answer your question. But it's not something I would know, and I would assume that MDMA wouldn't be as risky for the patient or for the person with a history in their family of schizophrenia, unless they have the history of schizophrenia themselves. Although I know that many disorders are an exclusion, like for example, bipolar disorder. But I know also of people who were greatly helped by those psilocybin journeys in that context. And one of my colleagues is working on that, on some kind of approved research. But it's quite a high risk, and no sponsors and no people, no teams want to take that risk, because then if we do, induce psychosis with those drugs to someone, who takes responsibility for that person and the long-term well-being? So if someone who applies to our retreats has any history of psychosis or close family, we would exclude them.
Thank you. I remember that once I read about research about psychedelics in the treatment of schizophrenia, and that surprised me because I don't remember where it was. Maybe in England or maybe somewhere else. But they pursued with research on treating schizophrenia with psychedelics, with LSD.
And I don't know of that study, but then again, I don't know of many studies, so I won't be able to comment on that. If you have read it, then that probably exists. If I'm asked for my opinion, I wouldn't risk, because whenever I, when I work in research, the patients are going through screening, which is very, very thorough. And, by the time I get to speak to that participant, I know that they have been checked in many levels and they are safe to work with. And also I'm looking out for any red flags that, will concern me. And then I can pass it on to the medical team. And even if someone has been approved for the research and I will find that they perhaps present with something that we didn't know about before, they can be excluded. Because then there is a responsibility. You take responsibility over someone. I don't know of that study, but, it will be interesting, to know it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I would also want to ask about microdosing.
Mm-hmm.
And people that had that family history of schizophrenia, for example, or bipolar disorder, can they take it as a micro dose?
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm sorry to answer the question in that way. I don't know. There is not enough research. I would assume that the neuroplasticity of the component of the psilocin or whatever is there, and it could maybe, but could maybe if I don't know. So the answer is I don't know, because there is no research. There's not that much research on microdosing anyway. And for example, Professor David Nutt would say in his books and articles that the experience, the healing part of the psychedelic is the experience that they bring, and not necessarily just the afterglow or the neural plasticity of the brain, which happens after the psychedelic experience, or perhaps with microdosing, but there's not enough research.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Milena.
Thank you. That was some really interesting part. And regarding the studies on schizophrenia, I'm pretty sure there was such study done in the 1950s or 1960s, which was before psychedelics were criminalized.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was the same study as Milena mentioned, but I came across to one study and I was perplexed by the fact that one person was cured from schizophrenia. And my question, I sometimes debated with friends who are interested in this, that the fact that it didn't help 10 people, because it was like this, 10 or 12 people in the whole study, that of course we should take care of these people's safety, and probably check up on them once in a while, but maybe it's worth giving a shot in some cases, if someone was cured, because it's almost like a miracle. Of course, for me, it's not a miracle, because my understanding of I know, or I'll put it like this: I know there are other understandings of psychosis that would shed more light onto this experience that we completely pathologized in the West. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cultural as well, isn't it? It's like it's very much cultural thing for us. I watched some. I went to theater with recently, and there was this talk by John Ronson, who is a journalist, and he talked about psychopaths. And there was a study that used LSD as well in 50s or 60s that was trying to cure psychopaths in the closed hospital, and unfortunately, it didn't work. They were trying to show them a bit more empathy and love and whatever, but the results were quite bad. So yeah, we could study everything. But to your point, that when it comes to psychosis and what we call psychosis in the West, it's not necessarily that in different parts of the world.
Yes, although I agree that we have to be mm, maximally careful. We have to be as careful as it gets, and probably these studies that we've mentioned are not gonna be replicated soon with schizophrenic patients. I think those would be the last patients in the history that will receive this kind of treatment, probably.
I think it's unethical, to unless there's someone who seeks it themselves, and like some of the people I know with the bipolar disorder, and and then that's how we know that but it's all anecdotal. It's not research, isn't it? But to conduct the research, when you ask people, when you seek people to come and take part, I would say I don't know, with schizophrenic people, this would be unethical.
I think that's also interesting what you've mentioned about people who are seeking this experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I also believe that this should be somehow included in criteria of the screening. That if someone really feels the need to do it, I don't know how to operationalize it or how to put it in words exactly, but I think it's important. Like, what do you consider in general enough for a person to enter a trial with a classic psychedelic? Let's say, let it be psilocybin. What criteria do you think should a person fulfill?
I mean, they will have all sorts of criteria to take part in the clinical trials. So these are like medical things and family history, and for women, for example, this would be being actively on the contraception pill, for example, or whatever else that they need to comply with. When it comes to the reasons why the person wants it, there will be a variety of reasons, but these are usually discussed with the person. What makes you want it? Why have you chosen this or not other treatments, etc. I would imagine these are the conversations that would happen. But then who is there to decide what the motive of the person should be, one person might say, "Oh, I've heard about it, or I've seen it in some university's website," and then the other person might be saying, "Oh, I've read Michael Pollan's book," and that's quite often the answer, that people will read a little bit or have heard of someone who went to Peru and got cured with ayahuasca journeys, and people want the same. But I would say that with with people who are taking part, with the participants of these trials, or even the retreats, the legal retreats in the Netherlands or other places, you will see the variety of people who are, some of them have I would say that the more practices the person has, like, the meditation, yoga, grounding, reflection, and, self-awareness, the more they can benefit from it, from that experience. And for some people, they're just not ready. They just heard something somewhere. But then again, who am I to judge if the person is ready? If I would say that if someone comes to these retreats or research and they have gone through screening, it's theirs. Who else should decide for them?
Thank you so much. This has been really amazing.
Thank you.
And I think we're gonna let some people maybe last chance of coming up with a question. And meanwhile, I would like to ask you about some sort of brief summary on two topics that we have mentioned mm, a lot of times today, and I think that are particularly important. So, one would be the safety and potential adverse effect of psychedelics, and second would be how current psychedelic prohibition makes it difficult to make clinical trials.
Okay. So I'll start with the prohibition question. So first of all, these drugs are classified as Schedule 1, so Class A drugs. So that's to start with. You have to go over that. And they are usually deemed as something that has no medical use apart from ketamine. All other psychedelic drugs are deemed as useless when it comes to medical use. So that's the first hurdle. So the psilocybin research was delayed for many, many years because, like, the public funding, like institutions, were avoiding to fund this research because of the political concerns as well. So it's all connected with the political and money. So the researchers also wouldn't take part in that because they would be worried about their careers. So that's another part of it. MDMA studies, for example, was delayed again because they, like with maps and stuff, they have to transport the drug from Switzerland, I believe, as well, and some other parts of the. So, so even like the minor protocol issues would stop the whole thing. So the legislators were like really, really like piercing their eyes onto it. So there are many reasons. It's the money as well. So one of the things would be the money. These research projects are super expensive, and more expensive because they need more elaborate protocols and licenses and everything else. It's like top secret fridges or places. Importing psychedelics for research is very difficult, and obtaining those drugs is very difficult. So yeah, I didn't answer much, but everything is difficult in that sense. So the prohibition stopped, and another one, it's the stigma. Not only in research world. maybe it's a bit different now because people are more interested in it and people are wanting to work with it. But if you go to an ordinary hospital or psychiatric ward, whatever, and you speak to psychiatrists or psychologists, not many people are aware of psychedelics and wanting to research that. And another problem is if you want to recruit participants for these studies as well, there are not many participants who want to take part, surprisingly, or maybe not, so there are a lot of problems. And I forgot what was the first question.
The first question was about safety and potential adverse effects of psychedelics. How could we briefly summarize the knowledge that would be the most important in your opinion?
So in my opinion, it's about education, and also if we legalize these substances, perhaps we could then create safe containers so people know about the safety, they know about the setting. Like in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, there's this shop called Kokopelli, and they've got this a beautiful place and sofas and ceilings and colorful things, and people can ingest some truffles there and have those mild journeys, and they're being safe in that environment, so there's information about it, there is know-how. And also when it comes to therapeutic aspect, we need to contain that as well and create protocols and create training for the sitter, training for the assistants for the whole team, because psychedelics are not for everyone. They are not. But then, people, in my opinion, should have a choice if they want to try it or if they want to use it as a medical procedure.
Thank you. Just one last thing. We have a question on chat from a person who's already gone, but I still would like to ask this. Are there any current human clinical trials in Europe using psilocybin?
And the answer will be yes, for sure. So if you look at the clinical clinicaltrials.gov, there will be a list. You can find that very easily. I don't know on the top of my head. I mean, I know Compass Pathways, they will have some psilocybin clinical trials all over Europe for sure. And other companies as well, like Cybin. There will be. I know one of the speakers at the conference. Yeah, there will be a lot of. Psilocybin is the most popular, apart from MDMA, psychedelic that is researched. There's a lot of research on psilocybin.
Yes, in fact, Jagoda wrote on chat that there are quite a few, and yes, it's true that.
You posted the clinical trials. Yeah, there will be loads. The 5-MeO DMT that I'm working with, the Beckley site, this was the first one in. I don't know if in Europe, but in Poland for sure, or maybe here in the UK as well with 5-MeO DMT. But since then, there are other companies doing it as well. So it's fast growing, fast evolving field.
Yeah, I just typed into clinical trials. I mean, I filtered by psilocybin and by Europe. I didn't filter by humans though, but I used cluster headaches and alcohol use, all those things. And yeah, there's Denmark, there's Sweden, there's Czechia, there's actually quite a bit of a range. So yeah,
there's a lot going on, and I'm hoping that and also with cluster headaches, this is very interesting, because many people find it helpful with the microdosing psilocybin, and these are people who suffered for many, many years, and there was no, and the headache is something that most of us can relate to. Every now and again, we would have a headache, and if it doesn't go, that's debilitating for people. So.
Thanks, Jagoda, for this link to the trials. And thank you all for participating today. It was a really nice experience for me to have a meeting with you. Angelika, do you have any something you want to say for the end to the people, like your message or something like this?
Message. Yeah, I do believe in this work. I do believe in its place in psychotherapy, but not only. I believe that people should. That's my opinion. That people should have the right to explore and to be able to deepen their understanding of themselves and the world in whichever way they want. That's quite idealistic, but I'd like to be positive. And when it comes to our topic, which was the research and psychedelics, I hope that we will be able to prove, efficacy for it and help more people, because that's ultimately the goal, but also talk about the risks and the fact that psychedelics are not for everyone, and sometimes they can bring more harm than good. So, and thanks for having me. It was really nice talking to you both.
Thank you most kindly. It was a splendid meeting, and hope to see you again soon.
I'm sure.
We have a custom here at UniMIND Krako that I officially end the meeting, but I will stay for some time. So if anyone wants to stay as well, you will be most welcome to do this. Thank you, Angelika. It was a great pleasure. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, and same to you. Thanks.